I would say adultification and dehumanization are linked to every single mental and physical health difficulty that Black people have ever experienced.
Hey friends, it's me, Sabia. We're back at the Found Free podcast, where community, self-care, liberation, entrepreneurship, and everything meets for collective liberation. I'm your host, Sabia Wade, and I'm like more than excited because this conversation today is something that I feel like comes up every day in my own life. I think it's really coming up heavily right now in my life. So I'm really happy to bring on my guest, Dr. Raquel Martin. Look at us looking so cute.
I know. I'm so glad we text each other to say what the color thing
I know.
was.
It's like, I feel like though, like for Black girls, like yellow is our power color.
Oh, yeah. Yellow. I mean, every color. I remember.
Period.
Anything bright. I have a little sister and we're both this, I think she might be a little darker than me. And she said she didn't want to wear pink because she said, dark colors don't really work. I said, for who, girl? We the same complexion. It worked for me.
All
it worked for you.
Actually.
If it worked for me, it worked for you.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's color. Also right. Like some level of intergenerational trauma, like how we look, what we can wear, how we show up, respectability, politics,
and
all
it happened so
things.
quick. She didn't even when she said it, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm gonna wear some fluorescent beige, some I was just like, what you mean? You talk about me now? We the same complexion down there.
Well, to start, can we understand like how did you get to this point and in your career, and also like who you are as a person? I guess let's start with the person part first. Who is Raquel the person?
I always feel like I have so many different roles, but I think I identify as a scholar. It's like one of my primary roles, scholar and educator. I'm a mom of two amazing boys. I call them my magical monsters. They are 5 and 2. They are intense. My oldest is incredibly dramatic. And everyone says like he's very similar to me, but I am dramatic at this age. He's dramatic at 5.
Yeah.
So he has decades of dramatics. I mean, he's just advanced for his age. And I'm married. I've been with my husband we actually just had our anniversary. So we have been married for 7 years. We have been together for 14 years.
Congrats.
We've been together since I was 20. Actually.
Congrats. I'm always like, wow. I've been in a relationship now for a year and a half, and I'm like, wow, I'm really doing it.
Yeah, I like your face, man. And even on days when I like your face, I ain't trying to shank your face. Yeah. So like that's like what we're really looking for. So that I'm a professor. And it's difficult. It's like there's so many things I always tell my patients, like when we're talking about who you are, I give them an assignment where you have to tell me who you are outside of any roles, not who you are as a partner, not who you are career-wise, any of that. But I also feel like my career is very much like it's a mission.
Yeah.
So I definitely identify as scholar, mother, wife, overly dramatic, textbook East Coast Philly person. Like,
yeah, I'm from Jersey, so I get it. I've lived in Philly for a little bit too.
And I think that's very much like people be like, why y'all talk about where you from? And I'm like, if I talked about where I was from, I wouldn't have to justify why I talked to you like that.
It's a cultural context.
Yeah, like, you said that very sharply. I feel like I said it actually pretty chill. I'm one of the most chill. I've been out of Philly for a minute, so I'm more chill Philly. If you think I'm intense, don't go to that airport, yo. Like, don't go to PHL.
Atlanta's a different type of Atlanta's airport is like a different type of up, but it's different than Philly, right? It's a different context.
We're very to the point oh yeah, that was terrible.
So how do we get to Dr. Raquel Martin? Like, what was your pathway into getting into your career? I mean, I feel like I'm a doula, so there's a therapeutic approach, but I'm not any way of a therapist. And I try to tell people I don't have any degrees.
Don't put that on me.
But then I go to my friends who do this thing, and I'm like, help me because this is a lot. So how did you get there?
I would never have become a psychologist if I didn't go to Fisk for undergrad. So I went to HBCU, Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And my first real psych class was general psych, but it was black psych. Like a lot of people learn about the old school European American or whatever men, like Freud and Jung and Neither one of them are European. But anyway, I learned about Kenneth and Mamie Phipps Clark and the integration of psychology and science in Brown versus Board of Education. And I learned about Black identity development, like the doll study, William Cross, like all Dr. Cross, all of these amazing things. And it was one of the few classes outside of Black history that did not bore me. And I just don't like doing stuff that's boring. I remember sitting in my bio class and being like, this is too much money to be this bored.
Yeah.
So I kind of just stuck with the things that interested me the most, and that was psych and Black history. And I think I was always going to do something when it comes to Black history. My mom and my family really embedded in me that, like, you give back to your community. Like, Philly's just very Black. So it's a sticker shock.
Philly is like my second home. I'm from Jersey, but like I love Philly. I have like my grandfather and stuff like lived in Philly, so I was always in Philly, and then I like worked in Philly. And Philly is just like, it's just like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like there's Atlanta like Blackness, and then there's Philly Blackness, and I feel like Philly to me always brings in the arts. And and it's over like this underground, like there's just like, I don't know how to describe it.
The art, neo soul music, has always been a big thing, but the art music, like art is a big thing.
It's a huge component of Black culture in Philly.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like, and when you get into like the real, like the groups that are going to tell you like but who's having the house thing, who's having this, and you like really in there. It's like, I don't know. I would live in Philly if I just wasn't like anti-snow anymore in my life.
I hate snow.
Real bad.
I don't know not one East Coast person who likes snow. Yeah. Like everyone who's like, oh, I love it. You ain't never had to shovel nothing and still get to school at 8 a.m. because there's no school delay.
Exactly.
Like you where you from?
Exactly.
Like, it's ridiculous. I can't stand snow. Like, it's the most annoying thing in life to me. I hate it. But yeah.
It gives me anxiety, literally. But I want to talk about a really big, important thing. And I'm going to give like a little story. And so we can get into this topic. So right now, I'm in this like really, I'm 35, I think. Okay, I'm 35. I'm in this like space where like earlier this year, my great grandmother's land like fell into my hands, right? Which is in rural North Carolina, acre land. And luckily I was able to know like my great grandmother is still alive, who I call my Nana. There's my grandmother, my mom, and me. If I would have had a kid like they did, we probably would have had literally a 6th generation at some point. But like, I don't want no kids. So
I just want to deliver them.
Some
I have
generational trauma that we gotta like be like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm like going really deep into like my historical context and my ancestral context, and like, you know, there's ancestry, and I like literally found the space where like my family went from like when we were freed, quote unquote, and like where it went from like in my tree where it goes from like my family to like their slave owners, right?
Yeah.
And I've been also just thinking really deeply into like intergenerational trauma, like how it shows up in me, right? Which for me, like when I say like I don't want to have kids, it's more so like I seen the women in my life and how much they had to move through and go through, and being single parents and all that, and I'm like, that's great. I don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, but then it's like I also see a lot of strength in the different like generations. So I'm like in a space where literally I was on a land a couple weeks ago, and I was standing on the well on the land that is still like, we're going to get it back to operational. And I was like, dang, this is like the actual water where my family like did everything.
Yeah.
Bathed themselves, watered the vegetables, did all the things. But I also feel like that heaviness of looking at my, you know, family tree and being like, damn, it was really hard for y'all at a lot of points. And even like looking at death certificates, seeing how people died from things that were preventable, but knowing that like we didn't have the access then to get care. So just in my own body right now, I'm moving through like the generational trauma and the generational hope.
Yeah.
And so I would love to start the conversation on like the generational trauma and like how you define that, and like especially for Black people, like how that shows up.
I think it shows up in everything. I actually have always had this fear of also like you from East Coast, I have a paranoid thing about like Ancestry.com that someone's gonna try to plant my DNA somewhere. I'm just a paranoid person, you know, like
I just was like, you know what? I'm just gonna give it up. I have my blood so many places. Like I just was like, forget about it.
So there's that, but part of me, there's also a fear of I consider myself a very emotional person. I think it's a strength that lets me do my job very well. But even like when you mentioned like sitting on the like being on the property in the well, I was just like, I can't imagine.
I know, I saw it in your eyes.
Yeah, like it's a lot. So part of it is just being a paranoid East Coaster, feel like everybody the ops. But the other part is really just being like, I don't think I'm in a space to hold that emotionally yet. Like as a psychologist, I'm a person who literally I ingest pain for a living. Like I have an honor, just the honor to have people share with me the things that they share with me, things that they barely acknowledge with themselves. But it's a pretty heavy job because I get to share some great wins and joys. But it's a lot of pain in what I do. So,
and I feel like also a part of your job that's really like complex. I mean, working with my specific therapist, right, who was a Black woman who like Yes, we've been working together for like 3 years now, so we deep in there. Yeah, and I love working with my Black therapist too, because like when I'm like trying to like be on some bullshit, she's like,
"Oh yeah, it's gonna be a no."
So is that really a thing? But
got there.
But I think like when I work with her, right, like part of the work has been seeing something in my current life, whether it's like a relationship dynamic, maybe a friendship thing that I'm going through, or just a personal, like how I feel about myself or how I'm wording something when I'm talking about myself. And I'm seeing like in the present, I know like maybe this is like problematic for my soul, not, because there's problematic, I'm like problematic for me.
Yeah.
But then it's like, like you said, standing on that well and thinking about like the history, I'm like, oh, this didn't start with me, right? This is something that I learned, and then this person learned, and then that person learned, and now it's in me, and I'm working through it in real time.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, like, that's the part of your work that I feel like is so, at least from my outside perspective, is so complicated because people come to you like, oh, I don't know, I'm having a problem with my boyfriend or whatever, and then you're like, cute, but now we got to go back.
Yeah. Depending on... Yeah. I was going to say, it always depends on the patient. Like anytime people talk to me about mental health, I think the most frustrating thing to them is that like a lot of times it's like, oh, I want like a black or white answer. And it's like I reside in the gray, which is uncomfortable for so many people. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it could be that. It could be your current boyfriend. It could be the residue from your past boyfriend. It could be the residue from you watched your parents grow up in an environment where they weren't appreciated and you saw a man try to impose his will on your mom. So anytime, even if it's out of your best interest, you're like, you're not going to tell me what to do. Like, it's something as simple as like, he tried to tell me I can't drink cyanide. I can drink cyanide if I want to drink cyanide. And it's just like, right.
I don't know, right?
But we hold everything within ourselves. Someone asked me about like generationally, like where do we get it from? And it's just like, well, it shifts our DNA, right?
Literally.
Like the trauma that was endured by my mother and my grandmother and my great grandmother, that's the men in my life, that's going to be within me too. And I like the fact that you mentioned the aspect of generational hope, because a lot of people talk about generational trauma and breaking generational curses. And I'm like, yeah, I like to focus on building generational bonds as well, because people forget about the hope too, right? I talk a lot about like the stereotypes with Black people and how they're used to justify harm against us, how they're used to justify discrimination and violence and not protecting us. But they are also, with certain tropes like Black Superwoman syndrome, it was also a protective factor against, like, I don't need to worry about someone dropping the ball because the ball's always going to be in my hands. Like, I'm not going to give it to anyone, which is very much the aspect of the time. You really did only have to rely on yourself. That's why sometimes people talk about, like, the aspect of gatekeeping. And I watched this movie. It was Lackawanna Blues, like back in the day. It's an amazing movie. But towards the end, he does this monologue about how he feels like desegregation actually contributed to some of the issues within the Black community, because when you only had each other to go to, you treated those relationships with more care, possibly. You were able to know each other more. And I'm just like, you know, I don't want it to be a soundbite. Dr. Martin wants segregation back. I'm just saying, like, I think
there's things to think about. There is a gray space.
Yeah. When we have the reason why community and Black people, we have this collective consciousness is because for the very long time, it was just us.
I literally was looking at pictures of my Nana who's still alive. She's my great grandmother, right? She's 87. So I was looking at, like, we luckily, which is like even rare for a lot of people, like I have pictures, like black and white pictures of my
That's
Nana.
amazing.
Like,
I don't have that.
Yeah, like as a teen, right? And I like had to think about it because she was born in 1937, and I had to think about it, and I was like, wait, like, and this I'm moving to the land that she grew up on.
Yeah.
Right. And like I was thinking in these pictures, right? Everybody looking cute, you know, they pressed up for Sunday, you know what I mean? And I was like, wait, there's no white people in these pictures because y'all wasn't in community. Like there wasn't that. Like This was the Black area. This was the white area, right? And so even the other day I was talking to her and I was like wondering because like where I'll be moving to is like 1 hour away from the beach. And I was like, did you go to the beach? And so she has dementia, but she remembers all of her like past stuff, right? And she was like, go to the beach for what? Then I was like, to go swim. What do you mean? Right? And then she was like, no, like why? And I was like, but then I thought about it, I was like, the beach probably didn't even allow Black people on the beach. Yeah. And then I think about now where like I can't swim. Can't swim worth a lick. And I'm actually pretty fearful of swimming. And I just think about even those little things around like, it's not just like Black people can't swim, or it's like there's a history there of like, it wasn't even safe for us to go to the beach, and how much of that has been embodied, right? And just like shared through generational, even conversation or fears, or my Nana is like my guide. Yeah. Right. And so if she's like, we ain't go to the beach, that's scary, whatever. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's why I didn't ever have an interest until I was older and started to like flex my independence. Yeah. And start to make, just like I remember when I was younger, I was scared of dogs. Why was I scared of dogs? I love dogs.
To this day, I consider German Shepherds to be an evil dog. And here's the thing. I don't care if you have one. Just look at the history. You think we share narratives. You don't think animals talk to each other? Yeah. I'm just saying.
And I'm with the animals. I'm getting goats. Yeah. I hope you're not scared of goats.
I'm not scared of goats. Okay. But like when it comes down to it, I just think, somebody said at one time, cats are so snooty because they remember when they used to be worshipped. So they're like these peasants, right? I'm just saying. Yeah. German Shepherds, like I'm never comfortable around them. It's just, no.
What are like some common themes, like in the specifics of like the work that you have done, like research-based, people-based, like what are some common themes that you see show up for Black people that you, I don't want to say mostly attribute to like generational trauma, but things like themes that you see because of generational trauma, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. I would say adultification and dehumanization are linked to every single mental and physical health difficulty that Black people have ever experienced, period. Adultification is the aspect of seeing us as older than we are. So we're less deserving of protection. We're expected to do more. We're expected to not feel pain. Dehumanization is the aspect of depriving us of human qualities, like freedoms and like being able to go swimming, or seeing your humanity as an aspect of thinking that you have to be perfect. You can't make any kind of mistakes, which is one of the reasons why a lot of times Black children were reared in obedience instead of respect. It could be your life if you didn't listen to me.
Exactly.
I'm going to,
like, what was a safety measure there, survival measure, yeah. Is then now like present day a thing. And you're like, not saying that because we are Black. So let's not forget. But like, there's a different
this
context.
Is excessive. You ain't have to go upside his. He dropped a pan. Yo, like, this is
different context.
And I think a lot of times people need to understand, like the same way we talk about like breaking generational curses. I think there's also an issue with not really giving honor and homage to the generations that survived so that we could thrive, like acknowledging that my parents did all that they could and they still didn't have enough. You could be upset for the way that you were reared and also realize that it's their, like we said earlier, it's their first time living too. So I think adultification and dehumanization are the biggest things that contribute to that. Girls being looked at as older than they are, not having freedoms. Because when you think about it, everything comes down to like freedoms being taken away from us. not being able to go swimming, not being able to just have the freedom of hair color or hairstyles, not having the freedom to even be able to express yourself or have critical thinking. That's something that we take with us every single day, feeling like a lot of times you'll see the stuff that's like, oh, that's like a white thing to do. Hiking, being outside in nature without the fear of being caught. Yeah. Being able to ask questions instead of just you do what you're told. Yeah. Critical thinking. I say all the time, my children should always go toe to toe with me, because if you can't have critical thinking within your most salient relationship, and at this point I'm their most salient relationship, how can I expect you to be able to advocate for yourself with other people, no matter if they're older than you? Not saying anything just because they're older than you, they're an adult, no matter if it disrespects you, no matter if it makes you feel unsafe, no matter if it hurts your body, because you've never had the freedom to be able to say, that doesn't sound right, or I don't agree, or why, right?
And I think, like, I often think about that because my mom was very much like a generational curse. I don't even want to say breaker. She was just creating new things for the generation, right? And like my family, obviously, like I said, I have 5 generations, right? So like my grandma Gladys, who's the land I'm moving on to, like she was like dealing with people that were, they were picking cotton. My Nana, my great grandma picked cotton, right? They were sharecroppers, right? Like like I know like people in my life that had a certain way of existing, right? And like, then there was like my grandmother and my mom, and I see like in my mom where she took very conscious lessons from certain things. And so me and my friends were having a conversation last night, and it was one of my friends and was my partner, and they grew up in a very like religious, like Black space. And it was very, a lot of indoctrination into like, especially your women, you should be obedient, you should be this, you should be that, right? Like very, all that. And I was like, when I was a kid, like my family was very traditional. They were like, literally, I'm moving across from the church that my family went to as like, and they still go to. It's like literally across the street. Like I can walk to it. Now, is my gay ass gonna walk to that? Not necessarily. Okay. Right. Well, they know that I'm part of the lineage. Yes. Right. Because it's a small space. But it's like, we were talking and I was saying how like my partner and my friend were saying like how much they were just like indoctrinated into these thoughts, and how like, in our 30s, they're still like pulling back the layers, understanding. We even talked about like the slave Bible, right? Like how much the slave Bible contributed to our ideas of like, let's stay on the plantation and do the right thing so we won't go to hell, right?
Yeah, because it was hundreds of pages. Like there's a museum called the Jim Crow Museum, and I think they actually have a slave Bible, but it was hundreds of pages shorter than the actual Bible.
Yeah, and all was taken out was like the liberation practices, the freedom practices, equality was taken out, and it was like, you want to be here, this is a blessing, right? Like that was the whole thing. And I was telling them, like, when I was younger and my family, like I said, highly religious, Baptist, whatever, I had a lot of questions. Like I was like, so, and I like, oh my gosh, when I was a kid, like, I was a kid that was like born again. I was weird. That's what they would think, right? And like, but I was weird because I would ask questions. But the one thing that my mom did was answer them. And it wasn't, and sometimes like, for example, like if someone would say like, you need to have manners, right? Please and thank you. And then they would be an adult and they wouldn't have manners. I would ask the question like, so I have to say please and thank you, but you don't?
Like, is there an age limit?
Yeah, and they would go to my mom like, she has a smart ass mouth, like,
yeah, critically thinking.
And my mom was like, but she's kind of right though. Yeah. Like if that's what you're teaching her, then how is she going to embody that if she's not seeing it? But because you're throwing your power around.
Because you're supposed to model that.
Yeah, you're supposed to model it. But like I can look at that now and understand like where it comes from. But it's like I can think about like how my mom was like questioning, like allowing me to question things. Yeah. Allowing me to be like, this is not really my thing. And like still validating for me that I was a good person. Because sometimes, it could be like, if you don't follow this rule or this set of this or set of that, you're not a part of this thing, right? Whether it's your family. And I feel like a lot of Black people, I can say myself included, you just feel like the odd one out.
Yeah. I mean, I think most weird kids are critical thinkers, but it's also the aspect of, I consistently tell my son when he makes bad choices, because I want him to understand like it's a choice, right? Like, you know, you didn't do this, you know, that means you lost this option. That's a choice. It doesn't make you a bad person. You just made not the best decision, and letting him understand like good people make bad choices. I apologize to my son when I do things wrong, because I don't want him to think that like, oh, there's an age limit on respect, like or a minimum age requirement, right?
And that's how
so
it felt.
like,
Exactly.
yeah, you're allowed to have respect when you're like maybe 18.
And then people
not even
wonder,
18.
they're like, why is my child now like 16 or 18 or grown, and they're in relationships where they're not being respected? And I'm like, well, were they respected as kids? Because that kind of will lay the land for how they expect to be treated, or what they accept, or what they think is okay.
And you got a problem with her, and she acts just like you, mom. You know, like it's very much the aspect of, people will talk about internalized oppression. I like to think about it as injected to internalized oppression, which is what a lot of Black people are dealing with, right? It's not enough just to talk about oppression. There's layers to this. There's institutionalized, there's cultural, there's all of that. But injected to internalized oppression is the epitome of when I'm talking to my students. I'll be like, you only need to be told that you're unworthy 5 times. You will tell yourself the 6th time you're unworthy. That is what a lot of Black people are struggling with. You only need to be told that you are stereotypically hood. You can't do this career. You can't question things. Your hair is unprofessional. Your body shape is is inappropriate, unless you're paying for that body shape, because then it's very much the vibe. Like, you only have to be told that. And oppressors have always played the long game. These people who came up with these policies, they don't have to say it. It's embedded in media. It's embedded in news. It's embedded in thoughts. It's embedded in the books that we have to read to get it. Think about the fact that, like, in order to get a high school diploma, you have to learn European American culture. You have to learn the culture in the perspective of individuals who have historically and currently oppressed you. To get a high school diploma, your own history is an elective. That's absurd. Right? And you start to think that maybe it's not that important, your own history, or you start to get bored and you can't focus. And then now you have like a behavioral disorder. But why would I be able to focus on something that's boring? It would be like if I was sitting in a class, if I was sitting in a class and they were speaking French the entire time, I would probably get diagnosed with ADHD. I'm gonna try to talk to my friend too. I don't understand this language. I don't know what's happening. So yes, I'm fidgeting. I'm moving around. I can't understand you. It's not relevant to me. A lot of times, that's where like the overdiagnosis, the undiagnosed, they never think about the fact that like some stuff is just boring. Yeah, like I've read some books,
and I always think about that, like just in my life of like doing the work that I do. It's just like, for example, like I, have friends of different types, right? And like I know how to do their hair, or I know certain things that they practice, and they know nothing about what I practice. But I'm like, oh, because I was literally taught in school to understand your holidays, the way that you exist, what's respectable to you. Like, I was ingrained in this process of understanding your culture. And then for me to get closer to my culture, like Philly was a part of me getting closer to my culture. And I'm like, but I had to like get out of school, to like really go into like who I am as a Black person.
Can you imagine being like a makeup artist or a hairstylist and you couldn't do like a European American person's hair? Versus like it's understood. There's just been this whole genesis, and like even just hair,
even
and
the little wig
media.
dolls things, they'd be like, it'd be European hair, and I'd be like, well, what if you're not aiming? What if you want to do some crochet braids and you want to do some this and some that and some curly texture?
It's in everything. It's in film, not knowing how to. We've all seen those movies where it's just like, why does the Black character look like a shadow? They've never been trained how to light Black. What are they called? Actors and things like that. Why is, I forget it was Vogue, it was something, but it was a really famous photographer.
When they did Viola Davis.
And I'm just like.
And everybody, but then the funny thing was like, and it was like, cause we love Viola. But I was like.
We know how she looks.
Yeah. And we were like, but it's giving ashy. Like it's giving. And like, are Black people ashy sometimes? Sure, but I don't think in that space she was. Y'all just didn't know the lighting. Y'all didn't know how to.
Shonda Rhimes would never. She would never. You
never.
know, I was like, I used to watch her every day on Thursday, and she never looked like this. You mean to tell me this is like?
I mean, sometimes them wigs weren't hitting,
but that was on purpose.
Yeah, it was a little.
It was some things where I don't know the craft, so I'm gonna assume this was in the script. because I don't want to be concerned, because I just, but I think that's the aspect that's embedded in the intergenerational trauma. I think it's the adultification and dehumanization. I think it's the lack of freedoms, but also the passed down aspect of injected to internalized oppression, like the things that we automatically stop for. I remember talking to a patient in session about, she literally came to session about whether or not she's going to take her braids out because she had a last minute job interview. And her default was, oh, this isn't professional. Why is that your automatic thought? That like I have to change my hair.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause because we're going to have a part 2. Mm-hmm. In that part 2, we're going to get into like how does these things show up in our like everyday existing,
which is
the
everywhere.
Questions that we ask ourselves. I think it's like there is this element of like we see like there's things that people ask us, right, and things that people expect of us, but it's like the language that we are talking to, giving ourselves inside of our heads, right? Like, should I have these braids? Should I do this? Should I take this out? I got new growth. Now they're not going to say they're going to call my locks braids.
I was going to say
that
lock phase. That lock phase. I just got my locks done. Should I go get a headband wig real quick?
Yes. Yes. So let's pause right here so we can get to this next part. But thank you all for joining. Coming back for part 2 for the Found Free podcast with Sabia Wade and our guest, Dr. Raquel Martin. And find me everywhere on Sabia Wade. All my platforms.